I wanted to make a video about some things that I've discovered about the hook that is common to this 301 and the Singer 221 Featherweight. And as you can tell by the title of the video, it may be a little controversial, but it may be something to consider when you're using either your Featherweight or your 301. Things to consider maybe not doing. And I can show you why to think about those things, or at least why I think about them. One of the things that I really love about vintage machines like this is using them for their original purpose, and not just demonstrating them or saying, you know, look what this can do, it's so cool, but actually using them. And so, for example, at one point years ago, I lived in an apartment and I made all the curtains on a 15 treadle, because why not? That's fun. That's kind of cool. Saved some money too. But in that, I'm also keenly aware of not wanting to use them up or wear them out. And so there are certain, in my restoration projects and in repair projects, I've come across things that are obvious points of wear or practices that have been done on some of these machines that maybe could have or should have been avoided. And in particular with the hook on this machine, I've noticed some things over the last couple of weeks that really kind of surprised me, and that I don't really see a whole lot written about or talked about elsewhere, which is why I wanted to bring it up. And it may be a little controversial, and you can see by the title of the video, maybe you don't want to do things like free motion quilting or darning on a machine like this, like the 301 or like the Featherweight that has this hook, because of the nature of the hook. And I don't mean don't quilt. You know, I know the Featherweight folks out there are going to say, well, quilting is our identity. But no, I just mean things other than straight stitching, things where you're sort of jerking the fabric around, can really be injurious to this hook. And I think that part of that is because I actually think the design of this hook is kind of poor relative to the many other mechanisms that Singer has used over the years to affect a stitch. And I think it's prone to halting sewing, and there are even specialty tools that are created just to undo some of the thread jammy type things that happen to this. And that doesn't really happen or exist for any of the other types of stitch mechanisms that have been on other machines before or since. And I think, you know, the 301, relatively short-lived, but the Featherweight for 36 years had this exact same hook. But the other thing that it tells you is that no other machines have this kind of hook. And there are other full-rotary hook machines in Singer, of course, but these two are really the only ones that have this specific hook that I'm aware of, at least. If someone knows differently, please let me know. And I think it's kind of relatively a poor design, and because it's prone to a few things that other systems aren't. One is thread capture and spooling. Another is sort of wear to this internal thread loop guard that the needle sort of goes down between. Let me show you that. So you can see the needle going down there, and it goes between the hook itself and the thread loop guard, which is this guy right here. And the hook comes along. Where are you? There you are. So there's the hook right there. And if you want to see how this hook operates and forms a stitch, there's a great video on the Featherweight shop that I'll link below. And so maybe go take a look at that real quick and see how this stitch formation with this particular hook works before moving on to the rest of the video. So I've got a hook assembly here from a Featherweight actually, and I'll orient you to the parts real quick and then show you the problem that I discovered that really was the inspiration for making this video, which has to do with the thread loop guard. So on the front, of course, you have the bobbin case, which comes off. And within that, in the base here, you have the bobbin case base, which is held stationary by the throat plate. and bobbin case fits in there. And then there's the main hook, the jib hook here. If you want to take the bobbin case base out, which you have to do sometimes if thread gets caught behind there, or you can buy a specialty tool, you need to remove that screw, pull this open, and then sometimes thread gets caught behind this base here that stays stationary while the hook spins. And then on the back of the whole thing is this, what's called the thread loop guard. And again, the needle, as things are spinning, the needle is coming down in here to provide a loop of thread that the hook then takes, whips it around the bobbin case, pulls everything back up to make the lock stitch. And so this thread loop guard prevents the loop from getting out of hand, getting into the gears over here or something. And it's a real problem because for whatever reason, Singer also made some things out of very soft metal inexplicably. Case in point right here, the screw on the needle bar cuff on my 301 is really quite damaged by a screwdriver. I mean, granted, you need the proper size screwdriver to go in there, but really it shouldn't be that soft that it should just sort of melt like that turning. At any rate, they also made this thread loop guard out of really soft metal, unfortunately, because as you can imagine, with the needle kind of being in here, if it's off a little bit and scrapes against the side, it can provide scratches to this guard. And I'll show you, I haven't really gone in here yet. But for one, okay, so there's a bunch of thread stuck in there. Again, a property of this hook, specific to this hook. But also, if you look at this guard, I betcha, yep, you see really terrible distressing and burrs, and these are actually, like, I can feel them, they're actually pretty sharp. And this is caused by, as this thing is rotating very fast in this direction, the needle coming down here and making contact and just scraping along the side here. And like I said, it's really unfortunate that these are often like this and apparently made of just really soft metal, whereby the needle can just scrape the heck out of it. Let's see if we can zoom in. Will you focus? Maybe? Almost. There we go. I think, yeah, there you can see that's some pretty severe damage. And it's not really possible. I mean, you can file that down, but it's not really possible to recreate that ridge, which does sort of the job of not letting the thread loop go hog wild in there. And you can imagine that this can lead to snagging and spooling of your entire spool onto this hook. Maybe not the whole spool, but enough to make you really angry and stop sewing. And or fraying your thread or cutting or skipped stitches are often a possibility, because if that loop provided by the needle is knocked out of whack and doesn't get caught by the hook, there's a skipped stitch. And so I think this soft metal of this thread loop guard and the design and the spooling nature of this rotary hook make it kind of a poor design relative to a lot of other systems that Singer has come up with and has used in machines before and since. Okay, so I'm going to go a little freehand here and show you an experiment to demonstrate how easy it is to provide ongoing damage to the thread loop guard and thus compromise your hook and make yourself prone to problems. I inserted a needle into the needle bar of my 301 and I bent it a little. So it's been bent slightly towards the pillar. And you'll see that it goes into the needle, the throat plate, just fine. Just barely, but it goes in there. There's no problem there. But as I start to turn it over, you're going to hear that needle scraping along the thread loop guard. Here we go. You hear that? I'm not going to do it anymore because this is my good thread loop guard and I don't want to ruin it. But it's basically that easy, if your needle is slightly bent, to start causing some of these severe problems with your thread loop guard and make yourself prone to skip stitches, frayed threads, spooling, all that sort of stuff. Here is another hook off another 301. And again, the damage to this thread loop guard is really so severe, I'm not sure it's usable. But you can see that ridge is so worn down. You can see just groove after groove in there. And this is, I've smoothed this. I've tried to make this better. And this is as good as I can get it. And it's still just full of grooves. And at some point you just can't make this better and you need a new one. There are some places I think that might still make these or sell them. Certainly for the featherweight hooks, I know you can get pieces. They're probably aftermarket or made somewhere else. But again, I think it's really worth thinking about how you're using these machines to avoid something like this from happening and causing so many problems down the line. And I think the things that are going to cause this problem are either bent needles, of course, but definitely things like free motion, quilting, or darning, or things where you're moving the fabric around a lot and you're just asking for that needle to just gouge into there occasionally, or to be bent permanently and then end up causing this problem. Because as you see, it's still perfectly usable. It'll still go through the throat plate, but it can make contact with this repeatedly and cause problems. And with the featherweight, there's a whole other set of things that can go wrong with this hook. If the hand wheel's turned in the wrong direction, or if you're not holding your thread tails, or if the needle's in the wrong way, or if it's threaded the wrong way, all things that obviously should be avoided, but the consequence to those to sewing because of all those things and because of the nature of this hook is that things just jam and don't work right. So to wrap up, I just wanted to mention some of the other full rotary hooks that Singer has made. There's the 115, which I think in philosophy is very close to the 301 featherweight hook underneath, vertical, full rotary, that sort of thing. There's the 101, 201, which are horizontal with a class 66 bobbin, and I think that hook avoids the problems that the 221, 301 hook has for similar reasons that the 400, 500 series, which is also horizontal, avoids the problem. In that I think when you look at how the thread loop approaches the hook, race, bobbin case, etc., the arrangement, it's kind of all internal to the race in that the thread loop comes down here and then is looped around, the bobbin would be in here, looped around the bobbin case and pulled back up, while the race continues all the way around the outside and the hook is on the inside of this circle. And so there isn't this opportunity for spooling or contact or other things that you have with the 301, 221 hook. And it's kind of all just sort of internal here. 101 and 201 are sort of a similar arrangement. And the only other one that I can think of, there's the 24, of course, which is its own thing. And then there's the 319, which is a vertical full rotary hook. But I think that one also avoids the problem in that the needle is kind of forward of the bobbin case, or at least in a different position relative to the, it's not sort of right down the center of the hook like it is on the 301, 221. And so I think, the point of making this video is not to say don't quilt with your featherweight or don't do certain things, but to just consider what you're doing with your machine and think about avoiding the behaviors which can lead to some really serious consequences in terms of bent needles, in terms of aggressively moving fabric that's going to cause gouges to your thread loop guard, which is kind of in some cases irreplaceable, or at least really hard to replace, and can really cause a lot of problems if there are burrs on there, and in terms of catching and spooling thread, in terms of fraying thread, in terms of definitely skipped stitches. So I hope that was helpful, and take care.